Welcome back for another review. We're talking about the Fountain Pajot Elba 45, or recently called the New 45. Again, we split up a bit on this one, so Diana had to wrangle the kids while I did a real quick run through, almost literally. Didn't spend a whole heck of a lot of time on this boat. But as it turns out, that probably wasn't such a big deal for a couple of reasons. One, unfortunately, this was a quad-tour, or a four-cabin sort of charter layout that they brought to the show, rather than the Maestro, which would have the owner's suite, which we're kind of more interested in. The other thing, this was the first time that we've been on a boat, I think actually even the only boat at the whole show, that was the next one up in the line, the next bigger boat, where I was disappointed when I walked onto it, and even going back and reviewing our footage, I feel kind of the same way. You know, we went from the 40 to the 42. Yeah, big difference. Felt much bigger. Same thing on any other boat that we had gone on at the show. For some reason, going from the 42 to the 45 was disappointing. It didn't feel any bigger. It measures out bigger. You can see it's bigger, but it didn't feel any bigger. It just didn't have that impact, and I think a lot of that came down to the way that the boat is laid out. So if we'll start the same way we've been doing the others. You climb onto the back. It's very similar, almost the same layout to the 42. You have a nice, almost the same size cockpit. It's a little bit longer and a little bit wider. I think the only major difference in this cockpit versus the other one is that you get a little sun pad on the port side. They moved the skylights outboard onto the weather decks on the 45 versus the 42, and it gave you a little sun pad with a cushion that they put on it behind the dinette in the cockpit area. Other than that, the cockpit is essentially the same.
Yep.
Same walk around, and I'll show you in the layouts, comparing one over the other later. They're almost the same size. I mean, maybe a foot longer overall, but the proportions are all very, very similar. Go up front, up through the weather decks. It's again almost exactly the same as the 42. Feels the exact same. The only thing I could spot was maybe the footwell for the lounge area up front was a little bit deeper on the 45 than the 42. But other than that, it was almost exactly the same.
Yep.
Again, felt the same. It does have a nice big opening center window to the Salon that tilts up in the middle. That was nice. The handrails are maybe a little bit more complete, at least on the one that I walked on compared to the 42, but very much the same. So coming around to the helm station, the helm station layout is exactly the same. You've got the sail handling area in front of the actual steerage helm. So there's a little bench seat where you can sit in front of the steering wheel and the instruments, and then you walk around in front of it to get to the winches and the sail bags, line bags. There's a little ramp up, and probably the biggest single difference between this boat and the 42 is that you get a more deliberate sun deck area on top of the coach roof. There's definitive seating up there with seat backs. You can easily sit 6 people up there side to side. Consequences of that, the sail the boom in particular is starting to get pretty high on this. I'll show you a little clip of a gentleman standing with his arm up. The bottom of the mainsail is up over his head, and that's going to get harder to work on. The other thing is that when you go down into the cockpit area and you look up, the molding for that footwell sticks down into the cockpit area. So the visual aesthetic is not as nice as actually it is on the 42. The 42 has a nicely detailed coach roof on the inside with paneling. This one's got this big molded footwell that sticks down. It's not the end of the world, but it's a difference between the two. If we go inside from there, almost the same layout, little stairs that come down from the helm station into a nice big wide slider. Slides out past the end of the kitchen counter, just like the other one. Immediately you enter. The Salon is it's a bit bigger. It's probably a foot and a half, maybe 2 feet longer front to back, and not noticeably different port to starboard, but a totally different layout of furniture, etc. Well, not totally, but mostly different, particularly the kitchen.
Yeah, so it had an L-shaped kitchen in this one. I personally didn't like the two-tone cabinets with the wood grain behind it with the white doors. Just very reminiscent of like late 80s, early 90s kitchens that it's going to look dated quickly, in my opinion. Probably easy to clean, but again, with having the faux wood grain behind it as the frame and then having the white doors with the shiny metal hardware, personally not my taste, especially since the rest of the boat, as you'll see in the clips, do not have the white cabinetry. They all have the wood grain cabinetry. So it just stuck out as odd to me as someone looking at the boat. It did have the L shape. There was no helm station in the interior as well. So all of your equipment's kind of on the right-hand side as you're walking in. Not a deal breaker, but again, it's just different. You can't sit there because you are in the walking path to get into the salon. This boat also had two really nice rectangular skylights on the roof. Mm-hmm. The one thing I didn't see, and again, because I wasn't on the boat, but looking at our video footage and looking at, what I was able to see online, I did not see that there were sunscreens to cover those. So if you're in those lower, hotter temperature climates, it may become an oven in there. There's probably an option for sunscreens. Great visibility to your mainsail while you're inside. And I really do like that, but having the option to be able to keep the sun out would be really, really nice on those.
I don't think I saw a boat at the show until we got to some of the high-end monohulls that had built-in sunshades. I think maybe the Hylas and the Oyster had built-in. Oh, not in the Amel. I think maybe it was the Amel. But there was only like one or two, and I remember stopping and commenting to the salesperson about, "Hey, you got like the only boat at the show that has built-in shades, and the skylight seems like a dumb idea not to have these." But yeah.
Again, if you're sailing in the Caribbean, or if you decide to go, to the South Pacific,
in summer.
Even up here where we are, it does get warm, especially if the sun is beating on it directly. So I could see that as an issue.
Mm-hmm. It's funny that you brought up the finish, because actually I rather liked it. Maybe it's because I'm an '80s kid, but the boat overall actually probably another item as an upgrade, as a proper upgrade over the 42, is that the finishes overall were better and higher quality than the 42. Just if we quick rewind here of what you look at the rounded edge on the countertops, even in the bathrooms, there's more chrome, there's more metal finishes, there's just nicer quality. The same basic finishes exist, particularly below decks. We got the veneer wood, the Naugahyde trims, but more of the things like the countertops, the fixtures, the handles and hardware all seem like they got an upgrade in this boat over the 42 and the others that we've seen so far. I think the layout of the furniture is what makes the Salon not feel any bigger.
Right, it's almost exactly the same layout.
Well, sort of. The kitchen's in the same area. Mm-hmm. The dinette's in the same area. Right. But whereas the 42 had a helm station up forward, it needed a little bench there. So the cushions, the couch from the dinette stopped there. On the 45, it comes around, makes a full U, and sticks out into the middle of the salon area, taking up square footage in the middle of the salon area. And also the kitchen extends forward to where the nav station would have been in the 42. So you need to be able to stand there and work at the countertop. Mm-hmm. So it's an L shape, like you said. The companionway down to that hull is further back in this boat than the 42. So it sort of divides that space up. And I'll show you in the layout how basically the U from the island or peninsula from the 42 is right where the companionway is on the 45. So it kind of precluded them from having the U-shaped kitchen. Mm-hmm. So those little details, even though that space is physically larger, the way they laid it out makes it feel just the same, if not even smaller almost, than the 42 was. So Going down below decks again. This one that we toured was a quad-tour, but I'm gonna talk it up like it was a maestro because that's what we're interested in. So I pulled up our drawings and things off the brochures and whatnot to do layout comparisons, and that's the way I'm going to do it. But as opposed to the 42, the 45 only comes really in the two choices. It's either a quad-tour or a maestro, but there's no choices in how those are laid out like you'd had in the 42. The 42, you had choices in how you wanted the bathrooms laid out in the quad-tour, or the maestro on the two, the guest side. In the 45, it's just the one layout. It's two bathrooms with their own dedicated shower stalls, which is fine. I think that's probably what you want. There's plenty of space for it in this particular hull. Down to the bottom of the stairs, you're greeted with a wall. You turn left or right to go either the forward berth or the aft berth. The berths, back to comparing to the 42, seem like they're about the same size as the 42. They felt the same. The 42s were really good anyway. I mean, they had basically full walk around, almost beds. At least 3/4 walk around. Same thing here. We didn't physically get to walk into the owner's side on this one. But I did a fairly extensive comparison with the overlays on the specs to show you that there is a gain. There is a noticeable gain there, but again, it's not huge. I wish we'd been able to walk into it. Maybe I'd feel a little differently about the boat had we been able to walk through the owner's side, because on the drawings, as I'll show you, you do gain a few feet in the owner's suite, and even though we probably wouldn't spend a whole ton of time down there, we don't even do that way in our land-based home. It's somewhere we go to sleep, so maybe it doesn't make that big a deal to us, but might make a difference to some of you who care to linger and lounge in there. So let's compare the specifications between the Estrella 42 and the Elba 45. Looking at the length, it's about 7% longer, and beam overall about 4.5% wider. These two combined creates a pretty big increase in the displacement, however, about 18.2%. Go ahead and look back at the video we did a couple weeks ago about length versus displacement. I think you'll find that pretty interesting. The depth of the boat is a couple inches deeper. It's about 4.8% deeper. And the sail area is kind of interesting. It's 13.7% larger. However, if we look at the square meters per ton, we can see that it's actually smaller per ton on the Elba 45 than it is on the Estrella 42. And this is probably due to the boom being a fair amount higher because of the upper sunbathing area. So moving on, let's take a look at the Genoa. It's about 10% larger. We got a big increase in horsepower. We've got about 33% more standard horsepower. Makes sense, it's a bigger boat. Question mark, it's about the same in tankage. If we look at the freshwater, about 700 liters, and fuel, about 470 liters. It's the same between the two, which is surprising given that it's much bigger. If we see the Sayona 47, the next bump up is double the fuel capacity, which we would expect. So let's jump right into the layouts now. As we can see, laying the 42 over the 45, it's not surprising that the 45 is a fair amount bigger length and width than the 42. Next, if we compare the owner's staterooms, we can see that there is a fairly sizable gain in the 45's owner's cabin, which is kind of nice. One thing to note, it seems like the bed maybe got a little bit bigger. Maybe this is just a drawing scale issue. And for those who are curious on how I do this, I use something the same between two boats, like the head. I just use the toilet outline to show you the scale comparison. So the shower area, surprisingly, is also pretty similar. It's just differently shaped between the two boats, so not a big gain there. Looking at top decks, we can see that the cockpit area is a little bit longer. It's maybe about a foot or so longer overall. The width, really not much different. The salon area, a little bit more. It's maybe a foot and a half to a foot of more usable space using the back of the cushions as the mark. We can see that looking at the layouts, they're in the cockpit area nearly the same. We got the L-shaped settee around the table and the built-in bench in the middle. We've little seating area to the starboard side, just behind the helm station, and the helm stations are nearly almost identical in size. Really, the big difference back here was that they added the little sun pad on the port side and moved the skylight out. Reviewing the prices quickly, if we look at the Estrella 42, I picked a basic configuration as we would typically want the boat, with a maestro configuration and various options. Pulling up the Elba 45 with the same basic types of configurations, we can see that it is about 18% larger and about 19% more money. So, summary, what I liked about it, what I disliked about it. You do get a bit more storage here and there. It is a little bit bigger boat. A few more niceties. I guess the biggest plus for me was the big upgrade in finishes. Mm-hmm. It did feel like a much nicer boat from that standpoint inside. It felt higher quality than any of the other Fountain Pajot boats that we walked through. Yeah. Downside, you're going to pay a lot more for this boat than the 42, mm-hmm. and you're not going to get a whole lot more feel from the experience, I think. Be curious to see what they were like handling.
I think one of the downsides too is, again, as your mast and boom, or your boom, I mean, not your mast, mm-hmm. as the boom goes up to accommodate the seating up there at the helm station area, it's going to get more and more difficult for you to work on it while you're underway.
That's right. And you're going to lose a little bit of sail area compared to the size of the hull, and we'll check that out in the specs too as I go down through it.
Yeah, that's it.
All right. Well, thank you. We'll circle back next week. We'll probably be looking at the privilege that was at the show. Thanks, and hit the like and subscribe, and see you then. Bye. Bye.